Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend and colleague Alfonso Rachel. And this is the Virtue Signal, where we try and talk about some of the deeper issues behind the politics of the day. And Zoe, not too long ago, there was a company called Basecamp, and they were spending a lot of time in Basecamp arguing politics, a pretty left-leaning thing. And so basically the short form is that the company said, from now on, no talking politics at work. And immediately a third of the staff just says, all right, we're leaving, we quit. This is so unfair that we can't talk politics on company time. We quit. Basecamp said, have a nice day. So far, so good. Now we find that they've buckled to this, that they've basically apologized, that they've said, no, of course you can talk politics all you want to. And this is yet another in an almost endless line of people capitulating to this. Now, we've talked about the woke mob before, and I don't think we need to talk about who they are and what they do, at least not here. What I want to talk about is something simpler. I want to talk about the idea of bullies. I want to talk about standing up to bullies. I want to talk about how if you don't stand up to bullies, you just make an awful lot more bullies. But if you do, you don't get the butt whipping that you assume you're going to get when you stand up to a bully in the first place.
Sure. And the irony is, by this company making it a policy that they're not going to talk about politics, that in itself is pretty much a political move. We don't like this censorship. Now, if it's a private business, of course, they have the right to go ahead and make their policy and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how well that's going to fly in a very politically charged environment. And then you're going to come and tell them that they can't talk about politics. That in itself is kind of like a political move. And yeah, it is the bully of, because I'm pretty sure that these people think of themselves as the proletariat. And you're going to have this benevolent dictatorship of a company is going to come in and tell the workers that they can't talk about politics. Well, you're oppressing us. And so they're going to want to go back in there and they're going to want to talk about all the things and embolden themselves in all the things that's basically going to end up screwing them out of a job anyway.
But they didn't screw him out of a job. They left, they had a temper tantrum, they made an enormous fuss, and because of this, they got their way. This is the cry-bully phenomenon. And they got their way, which means that in the future they will know, as they've known their entire lives, that if there's something that I don't like, all I have to do is scream and yell loudly enough, and I'm going to get my way. And when you are bullying other people into submission, as the woke and the whole progressive movement does, you've got a very simple situation. You've got a bully. You've got somebody who has figured out that intimidating people and forcing your will on people will work because they will back down. They will become submissive and subservient, and they will back down. And this is the dynamic I'm interested in.
Now, but I'm saying in the long run, though, in the long run, getting your way at some point is going to get in your way. And, we talk about these people who are, their political speech is ultimately talking about eating the rich, right? And I'm trying to tell these people, it's like, look, man, the last people, when you guys run out of things to eat, when you guys bully your way in, you want to and pump your fist for policies that are going to make it more difficult for people to, keep their business up, when they're going to start rolling over their cost of being in business to other people and stuff like that. And you're always seeing the cost of living go up, and you're going to want more and more to be able to offset that. And while you're saying, the last thing we're going to eat is going to eat the rich. No, you're never going to eat the rich. The last people.
That's right. Yeah, you'll be broiling your rats on sticks over burning tires in the streets.
Your own children.
And the rich are going to be enjoying themselves a gourmet dinner some fair distance away from where you can reach them.
That's right. The rich, matter of fact, the poor will be the last thing. When they run out of rats to eat, they will eat themselves. All right. History has shown that. All right. So these are the things that these people, like I said, get in their way at some point will get in their own way. May not be as immediate, but that's, what we call the boiling the frog dynamic. It's like it's like they're just going to keep on warming up in it until it's going to overheat. And they're going to be wondering, hey, how come everything is so expensive? How come I don't have a job?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a theory about bullying, and it's a biological theory, and I think it bears mentioning because I think it's the answer to this kind of intimidation. So let me tell you what I think about this. I've talked to people who will say that if a mare gives birth to a foal, and the foal has some kind of birth defect, there might be 5 or 6 mares around this foal, and they're using their nose to try and help this baby foal get on its feet. And the next thing you know, a stallion appears. And when he sees that this foal is deformed, he simply stomps it to death with his hoofs. And that's not a very Disney ending, but the reason that the stallion is wired to do that is because it understands that if this birth defect is allowed to continue, it will then be passed on to the rest of the herd, and so it has to be terminated here. The reason I started thinking about bullying in a biological sense is actually pretty simple. When you're being bullied, you assume that this bully is giving you grief because of you personally, and that there's something about this bully that hates you, who you are, not what you are. This guy hates me and he wants to kick my butt all the time. So I'm just gonna, I'm just stuck with it. But every time I look at bullies and how they behave, the thing I find is that when they stand up, the bullies don't beat them. They simply go away and start bullying somebody else. And I've come to believe that this social phenomenon called bullying is kind of it's almost like a vestige of this biological imperative to stamp out weakness. And that what bullies are looking for is they're not looking for Billy Whittle, they're looking for weakness, and they are going to attack weakness wherever they see it. And the reason this is so interesting to me is because, as I said, when you stand up to a bully, you would think that, okay, I'm going to hit him back. That's going to mean he's really going to be angry at me. But my experience with this, and the one fight I've been in my entire life, was just exactly the opposite. That the second I stood up to this guy, he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? What? I thought you were going to kill me. No, he's not interested in me anymore. This seems to me to be the pattern everywhere. And that standing up to bullies reduces the number of bullies, and conversely, caving into bullies. Hey, I'm sorry. Give me your lunch money. Sure. I could bring some extra money tomorrow if you want to. You better. Why is it that so few people understand this dynamic when it's so simple? I have yet to hear of a case ever, where a bully was threatening somebody weaker than he was, threatening to hurt him in a fight, and having that weaker person stand up and then having that bully get angrier and really beat the crap out of him. I've never heard of it happening, ever. All you have to do is make it clear that you're not going to be pushed around. And in these cases of, I'm not talking about psychopaths or criminals now, I'm talking about social bullying, gone.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why.
It deactivates them.
Sure. I guess maybe like what we're dealing right now is there has to be a collective of it, like say for instance, right now we know that, when we talk about bullies, hey, look at Facebook, look at YouTube, Google and all these people. And I think there's a lot of people thinking that, maybe they're fighting the monster. And I got off of Facebook and I got off of these bullying platforms, because I'm not fighting the monster, I'm feeding it. This monster has become, a big bloated bully. And it's just not a place where it's not feasible for me to be there anymore. It's not a cut and run sort of thing. It's just like, look, man, like I said, I'm feeding this monster. And to
get this poison IV drip in my arm,
right?
I'm getting 20 cc's of poison every hour. It's time to tear that thing out of your arm.
Yes. And so in that, we're talking about emboldening the bully. Right? Where the bully just can go ahead and feel like they just keep on doing what they're doing. Every day you show up and they're going to pick on you and stuff like that. And you don't stand up to the bully and whatnot. But the irony here is that this bully thinks that they're the victim. They think that the people that they're oppressing, they think that those are the bullies.
That's why it's Cry-Bullies.
Right. So it's when we think about this, there's the animal dynamic, like the analogy that you gave, with the horse. This horse is going to trample on this foal because it sees the weakness. But now we have a society where you have those who are the weak victims who are trying to trample out the strong. So it's and accusing the strong of being a bully when the strong are actually the ones who are trying to help.
I agree, but let me interrupt you because you're really on the heart of the matter now. Mm-hmm. Completely agree. You've got essentially a bunch of weirdos telling a much, much, much larger group of normal people what to do, and they're getting away with it. And this is the part I want to understand. Why is it that strong people, normal people, healthy people are constantly backing down to the demands of these lunatics? We see it all the time. What is going on with that?
I think once again it comes back to this collective, where it's you have it seems like it's happening to this person and this person, and unfortunately we deal with the dynamic of we don't care until it happens to us. It's one of those, and that's just human nature, man. And I guess the collective hasn't felt the hurt enough. We see it. We see it happening to different people, but you can't really empathize because it hasn't happened to you. So until it does, not enough people are really going to speak up. And unfortunately, that's probably what it's going to take until people start to feel the pain of it themselves. You're not going to have this collective stand up against these things.
When you look at things like the riots that we had last summer, and you can look back to, the early days of Nazi Germany where they had their private army, the SA, the brown shirts, and their job was to be in the streets and rough up anybody who had anything mean to say about Adolf Hitler or anything good to say about anybody else. And that violence worked, and it took an entire nation down into hell with it. And when you look at these things on a kind of on the absolute base level, you find out that the people who, at least in the beginning, that the people who gain power are the people who are most willing to use physical violence to achieve their ends. And when you see these, I'm not talking about the people with legitimate protests against legitimate issues, obviously. I'm talking about people that are burning down cities in the name of justice. And when the police back away from them, and when the police essentially just literally take their hands back and just walk back, it not only encourages them, it turbocharges them and brings out the absolute worst in people. And I just see this again and again and again and again, and it seems to me so easy for people to simply stand up. And by the way, Zoe, when they do stand up, they get rewarded enormously. If somebody stands up to the woke mob, like was it Goya Beans or something, and where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called him out for something, and like the next day they had like 6 times as many sales as they had before, because normal people supported them because they were being attacked for no reason. I still sit here mystified to some degree by why people who, like us, who should know better about what bullies are and how they function, why we continue to cave into these people when that is the worst possible thing we could do.
And from my end, I see a lot of people standing up against this, but I think a lot of the things, that they're standing up and speaking out on, unfortunately, this is what I see too much of. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff that they speak up with is a sabotage to themselves. Like, look, I'm glad that you got the spirit to stand up, but you might not want to stand up with that. All right, that's not the right approach. I see a lot of times Republican voters, they're getting up, standing up, speaking out, letting people know how frustrated they are and whatnot. But in doing so, they say a lot of the things that just give the Democrats more artillery. It's like they're being manipulated by Democrats, and Democrats are hurting them, and they're baiting them into giving them what they want to be able to drive the narrative. So I see a lot of that too. More just as much as I see a lot of Republican voters being silent. Sometimes they're like, you know what, maybe you should just be silent, because when you get up and speak out, you're saying the things that are getting us into a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. I think for most conservatives, when they see a child at a Target or something having a temper tantrum, and I mean a real one, on the floor kicking and screaming because they want this toy and the parents aren't buying it for them, every conservative I've ever met has the same kind of reaction. And for me, it's a visceral reaction. And that is, lady, if you're not going to discipline that kid through spanking or whatever other means, I will come over and do it for you, which is against the law, as I found out. Just kidding about that second part. But when you get right down to it, what all of these cry-bullies need is they need a good spanking. And what that means is there needs to be negative consequences for negative behavior. And that's just as simple as it can possibly be. This is how you turn a child from a feral rat into a human being, is by making it clear that negative actions will have negative consequences. And this entire fundamental dynamic has utterly broken down in our society. And we sit here wondering why these people get more and more out of control, more and more demanding, more and more intolerant, more and more angry. You know, they've never had limits set for them, and they've never had to face the consequences of just miserable, childish, brattish, bullying behaviors.
Well, I guess we'd have to, man, and forgive me, man, because I hate to be redundant on this, man, but say repetition, man, that's part of the lesson. And we got to get down to, well, what is negative behavior? I mean, because as it is, you know, we've gone through decades right now of making it seem like kids can run the house. You know, it's like right now, a kid can be so in charge of the house that they can say, hey, you know, the boy can say, I want to be a girl. And the parents have to accommodate that. So now that's very negative behavior. But for us to be able to say that that's a negative behavior, we got to deal with the consequences of being accused of being homophobic, bigots, and we're going to be punished for that. For saying, no, this really is negative behavior. So, you know, we've grown up in the generations where we've heard that, you know, the children are the future and they're the most important, you know, things in our lives and all this. Basically a generation of idolatry of kids. The Word of God warns us about this, where it's like, look, man, you don't want your kids running things. All right, you got to you got to bust out with that rod sometime. You want to save your kid's soul? You got to bust out with that rod. You know, so it's the word is telling us that. But like I said, you know, and I talk about these things, if I may, in my audio book, A Solid Right Cross. But we talk about, you know, how we're going to punish kids. We're going to take away their privileges and stuff like that. And wonder why people have such a negative association with privilege, right? We're going to make you do more work and we're going to make you do more chores. And then we wonder why kids have such a negative reaction when it comes to things like work. It's like, no, why don't we make it really simple? Something that they can associate doing wrongdoing with a rod. Bust out with that belt, right? That's what you got to do. But we're talking, no, and don't get me wrong, Bill, because I understand, man, there's some people, you know, we talked about this before. Some people can be abusive with that. You can't just be showing your kid attention when you're angry at him and you're going to beat him.
Right, of course.
Right?
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
You got to give them healthy reinforcement, loving, security. They got to be able to see that. You know, with the parental units. But you can't, father and mother, like the Word of God says, but you can't just, you know, be hitting on your kid and that's the only time you pay attention to it. That's how a lot of kids are screwed up now too.
No, that's right. Absolutely right. And I think, you know, when you said families are being run by kids, the entire country is in the process of being run by children, by fully grown children. And I suspect that a lot of this, just to close this up, has to do with the fact that we don't have nearly so many kids anymore. When we used to have a lot of kids, we could understand, we could lose one or two. And maybe it'll be you, so maybe you ought to mind your manners. And of all of this, I'm reminded most of Bill Cosby early in his career. I think it was pretty positive it was Bill Cosby. He was talking to one of his misbehaving kids, and he said, listen, I brought you into this world and I can take you right out of it. I can make another one looks just like you. And that I suspect has something to do with this pandemic of adolescent bullying and cry-bullying that we're seeing. This show and all the others are made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. We had a big membership drive back in January. It allowed us to bring my long-term friend and colleague, Alfonso Rachel, back to the fold, and we're very grateful for that as well. So on behalf of Alfonso and me, we will see you next week right here on The Virtue Signal.